My name is Mareile, and this is a bipolar guide to getting pregnant. And today I want to talk about my own fertility journey thus far, in order to give you an idea of what things might be very helpful to consider for yourself if you are bipolar and if you would like to have children. It's of course not hard to get pregnant, we all know the basics, but 1 in 7 couples experience infertility and are without kids against their will. And if you are a couple that is 1 in 7 and you are experiencing infertility, the options available to you will be less and it will be much harder for you than for the average couple that is infertile. So I'm German, but I live in Belgium. I'm 32 years old and I've already had a number of hospitalizations because I have bipolar I. Over the last 6 years, I was hospitalized 4 times, with each time a proper psychosis, which means complete loss of touch with reality. And they were each time quite intense. But in my case, at least, they were also followed by long periods of time where I was stable again and where I was functioning like a normal adult, where I would definitely have the capacity to be a mother as well. So it became quite clear for me early on, when I was like 27 years old, that I would have a life with quite some mental health struggles with this mood disorder called Bipolar I. And with that potentially less options would be available to me to have children in the future. A simple example is adoption, because their potential parents are screened well, whether it's a domestic adoption or a foreign adoption. Probably with a chronic mental illness, you're not going to be under the top couples to be considered for an adoption. And at least in Europe, I've also come to discover that when it comes to fertility treatments like IVF or any other support in getting pregnant, fertility clinics will be a bit reserved in helping you and will probably require approval from an external psychiatrist or your personal psychiatrist. In my case here in Belgium, that means waiting a year after a crisis or waiting a year after any change in medication, because of course all these doctors around you want to make sure that you are as stable as possible when getting into something so intense and potentially destabilizing like a pregnancy. And on top of these external factors, you yourself might need more time to wait for a moment in which you feel more stable, prepared, financially, your partner is on board, and your mood should be quite stable when you try to get pregnant. So I knew already early on I have less options available to me. Fertility treatments, adoption will be much harder, and I might need more time to get to a place where I feel comfortable for trying to get pregnant. And so I have been long over preparing. And one thing I did already a year ago was egg freezing. So to freeze some of my own eggs in order to give myself more time and flexibility in the future. And that sounds straightforward, but it comes of course with its own caveats. Egg freezing is expensive, depending on where you are. I personally paid 3,000 euros for one batch of eggs. And in the US, this can easily be $20,000. And while it does buy you some extra time, at the same time, these eggs are with the fertility clinic. So if the fertility clinic deems you to not be stable enough for pregnancy, they will not give you these eggs. I'll do a completely separate video on the topic of egg freezing, but I can tell you, well, in my case, it didn't really work. The number of eggs that were frozen were actually very few. And now, a year later, I'm considering to do another round of egg freezing in order to increase that stash. So after egg freezing, me and my partner resorted to the natural way. We tried to get pregnant, but it didn't really succeed right away. So we actually went back to the fertility clinic and asked to get our fertility tested. And this again is something I can only advise you to do, so that you have a better idea of your own fertility and of how difficult it might be to get pregnant in the first place. Because indeed, in our case, the situation is less than ideal. And if we were the average couple, the fertility clinic would help us with extra interventions to get pregnant faster. But I am bipolar, my medication was recently adjusted, and the answer from the fertility clinic was simply, well, we want you to wait for a year until your medication has shown to protect you well, and see you again in a year. Which I can of course understand on some level, but at the same time makes me feel very much out of control. And the only thing I can do is to try to stay stable, jump through all the hoops the system gives me, show that I can be a stable and reliable mother, potentially, and get psychiatric approval for fertility treatment. So that's where we are now. We know that we have a relatively low chance to get pregnant naturally, and we know that doctors perceive me as potentially not yet in the ideal circumstance to get pregnant. And this is another aspect of being bipolar and wanting to have children. It's always a decision for me and my partner, what gives us more peace of mind. Waiting even longer, hoping for the perfect circumstances, or deciding at some point, well, let's continue trying naturally. For us, in our perception, the circumstances are good enough, and we do not want to continue risking not having children at all by waiting even longer. I think there's a lot of topics to explore here. Of course, also the question, do you want children at all? The topic of egg freezing, the topic of balancing ideal circumstances versus good enough circumstances. And I'm really looking forward into deep diving a bit more into all of these topics in future videos. So please subscribe, please like, and I'll see you next time. Bye.